Love can inspire the noblest deeds, but in its shadow lies heartbreak and ruin. In Middle-earth, love is a force both beautiful and terrible, a light that defies darkness, yet often burns too brightly to endure. What happens when love becomes a curse, when sacrifice leads only to sorrow, and devotion demands the ultimate price? These 7 stories reveal how even the purest love can leave scars that last beyond the end of days. In the dark and silent woods of Nan Elmoth, where the light of the sun barely dared to tread, Eöl, the enigmatic and reclusive dark elf, encountered a vision that disrupted his solitude. Aredhel, the sister of Turgon, wandered into his gloomy realm, her beauty radiant even in the dimmest light. Captivated, Eöl claimed her as his wife, binding her to his world of secrecy and isolation. At first, Aredhel lived in uneasy quietude, but her free-spirited heart rebelled against Eöl's possessiveness. She was no prisoner, and her soul ached for the open lands of her youth. When her son Meglin grew older, Aredhel seized the chance to escape, seeking sanctuary in Gondolin, the hidden city of her brother. Eöl's wrath was swift. He pursued her to Gondolin, defying its secrecy, and demanded her return. But his anger consumed him. In his final act of malice, he cursed his son, inadvertently causing Aredhel's death. With her loss, the dark love Eöl bore turned to nothingness. Executed for his crimes, his story ended in bitterness and failure. This is the tragedy of love twisted by control, a dark reminder of what happens when love becomes possession. But what could be worse than this? For that, we look to the sea. The shores of Numenor were no stranger to romance, but the tale of Aldarion and Erendis unfolded as a tragedy of opposing dreams. Aldarion, the adventurous mariner prince, and Erendis, a noble woman of elegance and pride, fell deeply in love. Yet even on their wedding day, the shroud of Aldarion's passion for the sea loomed over them. At first, Erendis believed she could weather his absences, waiting patiently for his return from voyages to the far reaches of Middle-earth. But as years passed, her patience wore thin. Aldarion's heart was torn between his wife and the call of the waves, and Erendis, left to raise their daughter alone, grew bitter. Their love, once a beacon of hope, became a chasm of resentment. Erendis' sorrow hardened into disdain for Aldarion's obsession with the sea, and their marriage fractured. When Aldarion returned from a long voyage to find his family estranged, he realized too late the cost of his wanderlust. Their story ends not with fiery destruction, but with a cold distance, a love eroded over time by the relentless pull of opposing desires. From the tides of the sea, we now turn to the fires of the heart. High among the hills of Dorthonion, Aegnor, a prince of the house of Finarfin, stood watch over the lands. It was here that he met Andrith, a mortal woman of profound wisdom and unmatched beauty. Their love kindled quickly, but beneath its warmth lay the sorrow of inevitability. Aegnor loved Andrith deeply, but saw the tragic future before them. He, an immortal elf, would endure the ages, while she, bound by mortality, would age and fade. To Aegnor, the thought of her inevitable grief was unbearable. In his compassion, he chose not to pursue their union, leaving Andrith to wonder why their love had been denied. In her pain, Andrith sought answers, and her conversations with Aegnor's brother Finrod revealed the cruel divide between their fates. She lamented the doom of her people, bound to fleeting lives, while the Eldar carried the weight of eternity. Finrod's words offered hope, yet Andrith's heart remained heavy with the love she could never fully share. Their story is a tragedy, not of betrayal or death, but of love denied by fate itself. It is a poignant reminder of the sacrifices made to spare those we cherish. And yet, some sacrifices lead to consequences far darker, such as the pride of a king who dared to challenge fate itself. In the early days of Middle-earth, long before the rise and fall of great kingdoms, Elwe Singolo, later known as Thingol, wandered under the starlit skies of Beleriand. In the enchanted glades of Nan Elmoth, he encountered a vision unlike any other. Melian, a mire of unparalleled grace, wisdom, and power. The moment their eyes met, time itself seemed to pause. Thingol stood transfixed, and for long ages, he and Melian remained together, bound by a love that would shape the fate of Middle-earth. Their union was extraordinary, uniting an immortal Maya with an elven king. Together they established Doriath, a kingdom protected by Melian's girdle, an impenetrable magical barrier. Doriath became a sanctuary, a bastion of peace and prosperity in a world increasingly darkened by Morgoth's shadow. Thingol and Melian ruled as equals, their love a source of strength and wisdom, but tragedy began to seep into their story through the cracks of pride. Thingol's obsession with a Silmaril, one of Fëanor's cursed jewels, became his undoing. When Beren and Lúthien succeeded in retrieving a Silmaril, Thingol's desire for the jewel clouded his judgment. He demanded it be set into the Norglemir, a necklace of dwarven craftsmanship, sparking a bitter conflict with the dwarves. In his arrogance, Thingol underestimated the dwarves' wrath. They murdered him in his own halls, leaving Melian stricken with sorrow. Her divine power faded, and she withdrew from Middle-earth, leaving Doriath vulnerable to its eventual ruin. The once thriving kingdom crumbled, and their love, at one time a symbol of unity and strength, was overcome by loss and destruction. Thingol and Melian's story is a tragic reminder of how pride can corrupt even the most enduring love, and how grief can unravel even the strongest bonds. From this tale of pride and loss, we now turn to a love that defied mortality itself. In the twilight of the Third Age, Aragorn, heir to the throne of Gondor, first saw Arwen and Domiel in the woods of Rivendell. Her beauty was otherworldly, her presence a light untouched by the world's growing evil. Though a mortal man, Aragorn's heart turned to her, and Arwen, the evenstar of her people, saw in him a strength and love that stirred her immortal soul. Their love, however, was bound by conditions. Elrond, Arwen's father, foresaw the cost of her choice. To love Aragorn would mean forsaking her immortality and enduring the pain of mortality's fleeting joy. He would allow their union only if Aragorn reclaimed his throne and united the kingdoms of men. Aragorn, driven by love and destiny, took on this burden, enduring years of hardship and war to prove himself worthy. When he finally rose as King of Gondor, Arwen made her choice. She renounced immortality, leaving her people and the undying lands behind to share a mortal life with Aragorn. Their love brought joy and hope, but mortality cast its inevitable gloom. When Aragorn's time came, Arwen was left alone, her kin long departed. Stricken with anguish, she wandered to Lothlorien, where she lay down her life in the fading woods. Their story is one of beauty and sorrow, where love transcended eternity but could not escape the cost of mortality. From this bittersweet union, we turn to a tale where love is twisted by the cruel hand of fate. Few tales in Middle-earth are as devastating as the story of Túrin Turambar and Nienor Niniel. From birth, Turin's life was covered over by Morgoth's curse, a doom placed upon his family that would twist every joy into sorrow. Separated from his sister, Nienor, when she was still a child, Turin grew up unaware of the ties that bound them. He became a great warrior, but his deeds were marred by misfortune and tragedy. Years later, Nienor, grown into a woman of grace and strength, sought her brother, but the curse wove its cruel threads. Under the spell of Glaurung, Morgoth's monstrous dragon, Nienor lost all memory of her identity and wandered into Turin's path. Drawn to each other, they fell deeply in love, unknowing of the truth. They were married and conceived a child. For a brief time, it seemed Turin had found peace, a glimmer of happiness in a life otherwise marked by despair. But Morgoth's curse could not be escaped. When Turin slew Glaurung, the dragon's death broke the spell, restoring Nienor's memory. The horrifying truth that they were brother and sister shattered their world. Overwhelmed by her woe, Nienor threw herself into the river Teiglin, choosing the death of herself and her unborn child over a life stained by such tragedy. Turin, upon learning the truth, plunged himself onto his black sword, Gurthang, ending his life and his cursed legacy. Their story is the pinnacle of Morgoth's malice, a love turned to horror by fate. From this tale of despair, we turn at last to one where love defies even death. In the heart of the forest of Doriath, under the shimmering light of the moon, Beren stumbled upon a vision that would alter the course of his life. Lúthien Tinuviel, daughter of Thingol and Melian, danced among the trees, her beauty like a song of the stars come to life. Beren, a mortal man scarred by the trials of war and exile, fell in love the moment he saw her. Lúthien, though bound to the immortality of her people, felt her heart stir in return. Yet their love, born of pure devotion, was destined to face insurmountable trials. When Thingol learned of their bond, his wrath was swift. A mortal dared to love his daughter, an affront Thingol could not abide. In his pride, he declared that Beren could only claim Lúthien's hand if he brought back a Silmaril from the crown of Morgoth, a task no one could survive. But in his rage, Thingol revealed his own hypocrisy. He too had wed across boundaries, taking Melian, a Maya, as his queen. Yet, blinded by pride and fear, he failed to see the parallels between his own love and the bond between Beren and Lúthien. Undeterred, Beren set out on the impossible quest. Lúthien, defying her father, joined him, and together they faced terrors few could endure. They infiltrated Morgoth's fortress, escaped Sauron's clutches, and against all odds, claimed the Silmaril. But triumph came at a price. Beren was mortally wounded, and as his life ebbed away, Lúthien's grief consumed her. Her love led her to the halls of Mandos, where her song of sorrow moved even the unyielding Vala. Beren was restored to life, but only if Lúthien chose to forsake her immortality. She made her choice without hesitation, leaving behind her people and her eternal birthright. Their happiness was fleeting, their days together marked by the twilight of mortality. When Beren passed into his second death, Lúthien soon followed, fading from the world and breaking all ties with her immortal kin. Thingol, who had sought to protect his daughter, instead became a player in the tragedy that claimed her. Their story is one of love's ultimate sacrifice. Not a tale of triumph, but of profound loss. A fleeting union that defied gods and kings, but was inevitably consumed by the cruel march of time. These stories of love in Middle-earth are as heartbreaking as they are unforgettable. Each one reveals the depths of sacrifice and the pain of choices that defy fate. They leave us with a lingering question. How far would you go for love, knowing it could lead to tragedy? And in the end, would it be worth it? Share which story left the greatest impact on you, and stay with us for more journeys through Tolkien's world.